So you're helping companies with ICOs, and the landscape has shifted very dramatically. What are the trends you're seeing? Can the ICO market recover?
I think the ICO market can absolutely recover. What we saw last year was the ICO market really starting. This was 2017, and there was kind of this furor. All of a sudden it exploded, and I think that was a combination of institutional investors and really smart crypto investors getting involved. But then this retail hype that started to build around it was an accelerant, like a yeast that made the whole space explode. And what we saw was that was unsustainable at that time, and the technology wasn't being developed fast enough to support that interest. So we saw a crash. And now we're seeing it slowly rise again as people get more sophisticated about the diligence they do. Now they understand which of these projects are going to be successful.
So how are ICOs different today than they were last year?
I don't think ICOs are that different today than they were last year. I think what's different is the investors. There are more investors with more sophistication coming into the space, and the existing investors are getting more and more sophisticated about the space. But the ICOs are similar. They're structured pretty similarly. There are slight changes. Some of them are raising smaller amounts or raising over a longer period of time. But at the end of the day, it's still the same type of project raising money, and it's more about investors understanding which of these are good and which are bad, because at the end of the day, so many of these projects are low quality, a massive percentage of them, and you really have to make sure you're filtering out those bad ones before investing in the good ones.
Massive percentage. This as regulators in the UK and the US are considering how this space should be regulated. What kind of regulation are you expecting, and what kind of regulation do you hope for?
I think the big issue, at least in the ICO space specifically, is the issues of securities law. Are what these people are selling securities, or are they not securities? And our perspective is generally that at the time of the sale, almost all of these are securities and need to be regulated as such. That's a well-trod, well-lit industry, selling securities and buying securities, and there's lots of regulation around that today. I don't think it has to be different for the ICO industry. There are some changes that will happen around the specifics there, but at the, when you look at it as a whole, we've been selling securities in the US, private securities, for decades, and it's not going to change that much as we call it a token instead of a convertible note or anything else.
Are we at a new normal, or do you see the potential for this route to return?
I think it's such a cyclical industry at this point. We don't know what's going to happen yet, and it's so immature. So we've got to wait for this ecosystem to develop. At this point, it's still incredibly risky to invest in this space. You've got to make sure you're doing your diligence, and we'll see ups and downs over the next couple of years as the space matures and as technologies actually ship and start to be used for the first time.
So Bitcoin is trading in a really tight range right now. Do you think that will continue?
I think Bitcoin has started to stabilize a little bit more. What we saw until basically a couple months ago was that every single asset in the crypto space was highly correlated. Bitcoin was highly correlated with Ethereum and highly correlated with basically every other asset. Bitcoin has started to become slightly detached from the rest of the assets, which to me means that it's starting to develop its own fundamental value separate from just the hype around the crypto space. And evaluating that has become easier than evaluating some of these other projects.